Imagine it's November. Not your November. No thermostat, no grocery run, no coat you bought online and forgot about until the weather turned. Just you. A fire the size of a dinner plate. And outside, a darkness so complete and a cold so deep that it has a physical weight to it. You have no idea when the cold will break. You don't know if your food will last. And the people next to you, the ones you love, are looking at you for answers you don't have. That was the real winter. And somehow, for hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors not only survived it, they made it through well enough to eventually become us. Here's what I couldn't stop thinking about when I first went down this rabbit hole. We talk about ancient humans like they were barely hanging on, primitive, lucky, one bad storm away from extinction. But the more I learned, the more I realized we had it completely backwards. These people weren't surviving despite the winter. In a very real sense, they were shaped by it. And by the end of this, I think you'll see your own capacity for resilience in a completely different light. But first, let me show you just how brutal the problem actually was. We're talking about the Pleistocene, ice ages that lasted tens of thousands of years, temperatures that regularly dropped so far below freezing that the Thames River, the Thames, would freeze solid enough to hold festivals on it, and that was just medieval England. Go back further, and you're looking at a Europe where glaciers sat on top of what is now London, where woolly mammoths weren't a curiosity. They were a food source, a clothing source, a survival source, and our ancestors, Homo sapiens, but also Neanderthals before them, had to get through this with no agriculture, no stored grain, no salt to preserve meat at scale, no written knowledge passed down through books, just their bodies, their minds, and each other. Think about that for a second. When you open your fridge and there's nothing good in it, there's a low-key panic, right? This low hum of anxiety, that feeling, that ancient irrational dread is ancient. It's real. It's your nervous system remembering something your conscious mind has forgotten. So what did they actually do? The first thing, and honestly the most important, was that winter survival didn't start in winter. It started in summer, in autumn. The moment the days began to shorten, ancient humans shifted into a completely different mode of being. Archaeologists call it intensified resource acquisition, but let me translate that into plain language. They went hard. Hunter-gatherer groups in northern climates would spend the warmer months in a near-constant state of productive movement, hunting large game and using every single part of the animal, not just the meat. The fat was rendered down and stored. Bones were cracked for marrow and made into tools. Sinew became rope. Hides became shelter and clothing. Nothing was wasted, not because they were morally superior to us, but because waste was death. There's a site in what is now Ukraine, Mezhyrich, where archaeologists found a hut built almost entirely from mammoth bones. Over 150 mammoths worth of bones arranged into a structure that could withstand wind and hold heat. Think about what it takes to even conceptualize that. You have to understand architecture. You have to understand insulation. You have to plan months ahead. These weren't people stumbling through the dark. These were engineers working with the only materials the world gave them. That's the first aha moment. Ancient humans weren't reactive. They were relentlessly proactive in conditions that make our modern version of planning, buying ahead, setting reminders, making lists, look like child's play. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because surviving the cold physically, that's almost the easier part to understand. What's harder to wrap your head around is how they survived it psychologically. Winter, for ancient humans, wasn't just cold, it was dark. In northern latitudes, you might get 5 or 6 hours of usable daylight. The rest is blackness, and when you're living in a small group, maybe 15, maybe 30 people, in a cave or a semi-permanent shelter, sealed in by snow, burning through food stores you can see shrinking every day. The mind becomes its own threat. We know this because of what they left behind. Cave paintings, not maps, not instruction manuals. Art. The caves of Lascaux, Altamira, Chauvet, some of the most stunning, emotionally alive art ever made, was created in the deepest parts of underground caves, places you'd have to crawl into with only firelight. Why? Why go that deep? The honest answer is, we don't fully know. But the leading thinking is that these spaces were sacred, ritualistic, a place where the community could gather meaning in the middle of meaninglessness, where the stories that held them together could be told and retold and painted into permanence. Because here's the thing, story was technology. Oral tradition wasn't just entertainment. It was the hard drive of the community. Every winter around the fire, the elders would transmit everything the group knew. Which plants were safe? Which rivers flooded in the thaw? Which stranger clans could be trusted? The stories were the survival manual, and the act of telling them, of sitting together in the dark and making meaning, was itself a form of psychological survival. We've all had a version of this, right? A hard year, a long night. And what got you through wasn't just logistics, it was the people around you and the story you told yourself about why it was worth enduring. There were also physical adaptations happening in real time. Clothing made from layered furs. Archaeologists have found evidence of tailored, fitted garments going back 30,000 years. Not just animal skins thrown over shoulders, tailored with bone needles. Eyed needles, which allow you to thread sinew through and sew tight seams that actually keep wind out. Food preservation through drying and freezing, using the winter itself as a refrigerator, storing meat in permafrost, smoking fish, rendering fat into a high-calorie paste that could be mixed with dried meat and berries, what some indigenous cultures still call pemmican. Essentially the world's first energy bar, designed to deliver maximum calories per gram, engineered food, long before anyone thought of it that way. And migration. The groups that had the hardest time were often those that stayed still. The ones who thrived were mobile, following the animals, following the season, knowing the land well enough to move with it instead of against it. There's a lesson buried in there that cuts right to the bone. Rigidity in the face of a changing environment is a form of slow dying. Adaptation isn't giving up, it's the whole game. So here's where we close the loop. Here's the thing I promised you at the beginning, the perspective shift. We've spent a lot of human history congratulating ourselves on how far we've come. Warm houses, supermarkets, climate control, and those things are genuinely good. I'm not romanticizing frostbite, but somewhere in the story of ancient humans surviving winter, actually surviving it generation after generation for hundreds of thousands of years, there's something we've mislabeled as primitive that is actually profound. They survived because they prepared, not just for today, but for the worst version of tomorrow. They survived because they built things with their hands and their minds and refused to waste anything the world offered them. They survived because they understood that the group was more important than the individual, that your neighbor's warmth was also your warmth. And they survived because in the darkest, coldest part of the year, when despair would have been the rational response, they went into caves and painted horses and bison and handprints on the walls. Not because it kept them warm, because it reminded them that they were here, that their lives had shape and color and meaning. That beauty was worth making even when, maybe especially when, the world outside was trying to end them. Look, you're not facing an ice age, but you know what it feels like to be in a season that seems like it won't end. A stretch of life that's cold in ways that have nothing to do with temperature. And what these people teach us, what they prove, is that the species that made it through wasn't the strongest or the luckiest. It was the ones who prepared before the storm, who held their community close inside it, who made something meaningful in the middle of it. That's not ancient history, that's the blueprint, and it still works. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There are many more fascinating stories, mysteries, and thought-provoking videos coming soon, and you won't want to miss them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.